And thank you for inviting us. And it is a pleasure being on this stage named after two wonderful women, one mathematician and one scientist, Mariam Mirzakhani and Marie Curie. Thank you.
Yes, thank everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to share with you our thoughts on how data science and machine learning can be used for environmental good. Tonight, you're going to hear the President of the United States talk about the State of the Union, and Tanya and I today would like to talk about the state of the planet. And we're going to use the Living Planet report to talk about how we see machine learning helping make the planet a better place for not only us, but for all the wildlife that live on it. The state of the planet is not good. 60% of the terrestrial animals across many different taxa have been declining between 1970 and 2014. 60% of life has been vanishing. The Earth is estimated to lose about 50% of its shallow corals due to climate warming. And 20% of the Amazon has disappeared in just 50 years. Globally, nature provides millions and trillions of dollars for ecosystem management and for effective use of the planet. The problem is that much of our interpretation is limited by the lack of good data so that we can actually make models so we can predict what's going to happen and guide policymakers to formulate action plans that intervene to preserve the planet and make it healthy for us and the animals that live there. You can see in this data here from elephants that in some parts of Africa, people guess what's going on, and they smooth it based on very small, fine-scale studies that they expand globally and smooth. This data is not very good, and you can see even when you come to the red data list for killer whales that it's data deficient. How can you make a decision if you don't have data? Similarly, the polar bear. It's listed as vulnerable, but you can't even make a prediction about its population growth rate of decline because the data is highly limited. Whale sharks, which we're going to return to later, if you look at the highlighted yellow, the number of genetically distinct animals, the genetic effective population size, is estimated to be 103,000. But look at that range. Look at that error from 30,000 to 180,000. If you're a policymaker, would you act on data that's so confounded, that's not very accurate? And if we start to ask really important questions like how many bobcats are left in the world, or how many sea turtles make it out from the breeding beaches, or how far do whales travel, or how fast do elephant populations decline, it's usually based on guesses, on sparse data that's expanded and extrapolated to make decisions. There's been efforts to improve this. So flights all over Africa, country by country, have gone out to try to count the number of elephants that stand out against a landscape where they often hide. And $8 million spent over 2 years has allowed us to get a glimpse that some populations are expanding, but more are declining. This is not scalable. It's expensive, it takes time, it's not going to give us the instantaneous types of data that we need to make effective decisions. The alternative is to put GPS collars on animals, get fine-grained data, but the limit then is that that data comes from very few animals and has to be extrapolated up. And accidents do happen, animals do die, and charismatic megafauna then gets in the lens, in the sights of the public who says, how dare you scientists inflict harm to animals as you learn about them to save them. The advantages are that there's a lot of images out there. We now, from everybody that goes on safari, like Shri did over Thanksgiving, take pictures of the world around us. And those pictures provide a new window on improving both the amount of data and the quality of data that we can use to make decisions about how animals behave, use their landscape, and how humans impact those behaviors of the animals. That data can be gotten by scientists like my students and myself from our Land Rovers, or we can set up camera traps, or tourists on whale watching boats can get the pictures. We can get metadata from the animals that we get from the distinctive marks, like this turtle here is being measured for length, But the key is we can now get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pictures. What do you do with it?
So how do we take all these millions of pictures and actually make sense out of it? So we can take 5 years and a grant. We actually took about 3 years and went further than determining the species. So we can take all these hundreds and thousands and millions of pictures from all over these sources. And can you find all the elephants in there? Come on, that's the quiz time.
Or the zebras?
Yeah. So we can. So we've developed technology that can take all these millions of pictures and find all the ones that contain animals, find where the animals are in those pictures, put a bounding box around each one, and tell you the species. And we use a custom-developed deep learning pipeline that does that starts with an image, classifies the species, puts a bounding box around each one, classifies which side or part of the animal we're seeing, what's the quality, does basic segmentation, and then part of the innovation is also of all these animals in the picture, which ones can we actually identify individually? And by that we mean not only tell you that there's zebra, giraffe, whale, or turtle, but that is zebra, Zippy the zebra, and Terry the turtle, and Willie the whale, and Joe the giraffe.
And
right?
Zippy the zebra.
And we do that by not a traditional, an actually pretty old technology, a computer vision technology that uses algebra on the pixels and SIFT variables. I'm happy to talk more about it. And matches that across images for anything striped, spotted, wrinkled, or notched. We also develop algorithms that use the curve of the whale's tail, the fluke, or the dorsal fin of a dolphin or a shark to identify individual. Turns out, just like our fingerprints, animal prints and animal tail curves are unique and identify individuals. And with the help of H2O support, we're actually now working on adapting this technology to use the wrinkles and the shape of an elephant ear to identify elephants, so we can build the same technology for elephants. With information on when and where the whale was taken, we can really now use pictures and videos to track and count animals, to figure out birth and death dynamics and identify species range and social interactions, as well as species interactions. You see an example here of a fluke book, a Wildbook. Our technology is called Wildbook, the project as in a kind of book for wildlife. And this is an example of Wildbook for cetacean, 5 species of whales and 2 species of dolphins, where we use and as of last week, the entire pipeline from image to an entry in the database that says this animal was seen there at that time is completely automated. We take an image, we classify, we identify, we get the metadata and add it to the database. And as you can see, these animals are social. Not only we do that, but we also started about 1.5 years ago, we started scraping YouTube videos. We started with whale sharks, these charismatic species of fish, the biggest on Earth. And our intelligent agent scrapes YouTube videos every day, finds the videos of containing whale sharks, where the frames of that contain the animal are, identify that individual, and use natural language processing to process the title of the video to understand when and where the video was taken. In this case, Cancun, July 2017. And we add that directly to our Wildbook for whale sharks. We also post in the comments back saying, hey, we found a whale shark at 2 minutes, 46 seconds in your video. Here's what we know about it. And people respond. We've gone through from those 70 known individuals before Wildbook for whale sharks was built to now almost 8,000. This is last week's data, 8,000 known individuals that came to us. Thank you. Yes, that it is an effort of almost 8,000 citizen scientists and volunteers contributing their data, as well as 187 as of today, scientists and conservation projects working together, bringing more than 56,000 sightings of these animals. And our intelligent agent that scrapes YouTube, in the last year, 2018, brought in more data than all the human contributors combined to this data set. 96% of those data were the ones not seen by other humans, so that's only the YouTube videos, which people don't even realize are useful. And so now, for conservation. And now, the data for global population of whale sharks in the International Unit of Conservation of Nature Red List, the official unit that determines, organization that determines conservation status of all the species out there, comes from Wildbook for whale sharks. And the most comprehensive study on the biology of whale sharks was published a year ago, co-authored by 36 authors that met most of them only through the pages of Wildbook, because as a global species, there is not one conservation organization, not one research project that has information on all of those in even one individual. Forget about the entire species.
And now we'll return to the terrestrial realm. I started studying Grevy zebras back in 1980. And when I started, there were about 15,000 on the planet. We actually didn't know how many were left on the planet until we started using citizen science and our Wildbook algorithms to study individuals. You can see Grevy zebra is a beautiful animal. It's distinctively marked with the thin stripes. Don't confuse it with the dumpy plain zebra with the fat stripes. This is our team on Lewa who goes out every single day, and they use their smartphone. They use CyberTracker and the smart system to get the metadata. They take a picture. The data is cataloged, and it's attached to where it was, what's the habitat quality, what other species were present, was there water nearby, was there a sighting of a lion. This is how we build the metadata to start to understand the dynamics of what causes population movements and population survival, to understand its demography. This is our team, and this is where Sri spent some of his Thanksgiving. We then started to enlist citizens worldwide, and especially in Kenya. So January 2016, we had hundreds of people driving 45 locations over 25,000 square kilometers. That's the range of the zebras. They took 40,000 images, and 95% of the zebra species live in Kenya, and the Kenya estimate, the census that we got from the site-resite, a non-invasive way of measuring where animals were and they're likely to being resited so we could estimate their population size, came out to be 2,352 animals. Notice the publics that we used to gather the data. We have workers from the county council who spent Kenyan money to support this system. We had school children from the next generation using cameras for the first time. Thankfully, these cameras were provided by the National Science Foundation. Yes, your tax dollars, they're GPS enabled, so we had the location so we could get who, where, and when for the animals, and community members who live with the zebras. But this cross-section not only has those vested living with an animal that they often see as vermin that compete with their livestock, but we have the Kenyan middle class. And you see the person in the center there? That's the US ambassador to Kenya. He joined us on our quest, on our Great Grevy's rally. We did this again in 2018. We had over 1,000 people this time, taking 70,000 images, and this time the population estimate was 2,800, slightly more. So the population increased in the 2 intervening years. We also this year added our emoji and our smiling heart giraffe here because the Red Data List said that all of a sudden giraffes weren't threatened. Well, no one had a census on giraffes. The people going out getting pictures of Grevy zebra could also get the giraffe, which stands above them, and they often share the same habitat. So we spontaneously added this and got the first data on the giraffes in our locale. What type of data did we get? We got the first national count. That in 2016, there were only 2,350 zebras, but look at those confidence limits. Those are small, which lets policymakers believe that the numbers are real. And the numbers increased to 2,812, again with moderately sized confidence limits over 2 years. But the 2 years was a drought. This was a surprise to us. 2 years of no rain, and the numbers went up. You can see by county that the numbers went up in some of the counties that we had the lowest counts in the first one, but it was a universal pattern. All the counties went up. Why was this the case? Because the habitat the adults were able to survive. How do we know that? Because we're able to use the stripes to look at every individual, and we can look at the survival prospects and the fecundity of the zebras. And what we know from our mathematical models is that if the number of infants and juveniles, what we call recruits, is 30% of the population will be sustainable. And you'll see in 2016, across the board nationally, it was a sustainable population. In the two biggest counties of Samburu and Laikipia, it was an increasing population. But notice what happened in 2018. Despite the numbers going up, the recruit population shrunk. They were vulnerable. The kids were vulnerable to the drought. But I'm optimistic because the landscape after the drought now looks like this. Lush and green, zebras happy and fat. This is what it normally looks like during an ordinary year. The goats and the livestock graze it down so there's no vegetation. And what we know about the biology of animals, especially zebras, is if they give birth and they have the baby survive, the mother takes a year to recover her condition before she gets pregnant again. So she skips a year. If her baby dies, she immediately becomes pregnant. And with that lush green grass, that pregnancy is likely to be a good one. And now on the landscape, you'll see 10 Grevy's mothers here with 10 young foals under 3 months of age. The population is rebounding. So the goal, the expectation in 2020 when we do the next rally is the population will have withstood this assault by bad climate. The power of the people is such that the governors now, by seeing their publics involved in this data gathering, are investing in all sorts of activities to preserve the landscape. We also see that the cabinet secretary, for the first time when I handed him the report at the black and white ball, he said, we will accept these numbers as true. Never before in Kenya has a non-government official been able to advise the government and get a census number accepted as the national numbers. And lastly, in Meru, yes, it's really powerful. In Meru, the population where the demography was the worst, we've been petitioning for 10 years for the government to allow us to use immunocontraception on lions because the lions were eating the Grevy zebras. And they said, no, the lions and the zebras have to learn to live together. Well, after they saw these numbers, they saw Meru was now a county that was completely different from the rest of the nation. They've allowed us to do experimental trials with immunocontraception. Again, data gotten by people, filtered by scientists, delivered to national government officials, is changing the perception of the managers that control the wildlife and its protection. This is very powerful stuff. And as a consequence, in our latest red data list on Grevy zebra, you can see not only the optimistic forecast, but the numbers in the report capture the behavior of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the power of the people.
And if we are crowdsourcing, we're now the entire web, all the images and pictures, and the power of everybody who can just click a button and take a picture delivers data to science and conservation. But what is gold to science and conservation managers, scientists and conservation managers, is also, unfortunately, very useful for poachers. And so over the last year, we've been working to make sure that our system is secure by design. And we're creating both a security policy and a privacy policy, privacy for tigers, privacy for highly high spatial temporal resolution animal data for endangered species to ensure that this data cannot be and will not be used to destroy these species. So today we have more than a dozen Wildbooks covering more than 22 species and growing. We're a flagship partner of Microsoft's AI for Earth initiative that is enabling this transformation, as well as many other technology and conservation organizations. Our latest Wildbook is the Internet of Turtles. It's a project with WWF, and it's a real IoT. So machine learning and data science allow us to go from pixels to science, conservation, and public engagement at large scale and high resolution over space, time, and individuals. And it takes a village, a global village, the entire planet, and the work of many, and I hope you join us. Thank you.
Come with your cameras and help us gather data. And use your ability with machine learning to help us speed up the process and get the data analyzed in real time.
All right. So do we have a couple of minutes for questions? Yeah. Okay.
We can see them.
Yeah. So how big is the risk of Photoshop images? Not yet, but underneath all of this, we also have a clever data structure we're developing that allows us to quickly check the consistency of data. It's not only about Photoshopped images, but about the machine learning determinations of where it is the same animal or not. And I'm happy to talk more about it, and with papers forthcoming. But it is an issue that we're keeping an eye on.
Would it make sense to create something like a crowdsourced Google.com to allow people to explicitly donate their pictures to you? Absolutely. We have people scattered studying zebras throughout all of Africa, and they are crying out to be able to upload their images. Soon we're going to do everything in the cloud, thanks to Microsoft. They're working with us. And once we're up and running, we'll then be able to digest images from people. It would be great to have everybody's holiday pictures with locations, timestamps. It'll give us a wealth of data at fine-grained scale to know how, when it's raining in one area of Africa as opposed to another, does the home range change? Does the seasonal movement change? Where are the hot spots? Where are the corridors needed? This is the information that we will be able to use and give to policy people to start the negotiations about how you zone and design landscapes that are good for people and good for wildlife.
And especially for global species that are, most of them are marine species, or even elephants that cover the entire continents. Governments typically do not share data, and by crowdsourcing, we can circumvent that. So we're working to create a global portal and working with various technology organizations to ensure that we can get that data. How can you donate your pictures? Go to wildbook.org. You can upload them directly, just drag and drop. We will, as of May, we will have one Wildbook to rule them all. So, so you will be just able to connect your whatever source of images to upload. Keep an eye, the number of species is growing. That we're expanding our Wildbooks. Our goal is to cover all uniquely identifiable species, and that's in the thousands within a couple of years.
Yeah. The questions have been cut off. There are many other good questions there about data bias and a lot. Tanya and I'll be at lunch. If you want to catch us in our T-shirts, you'll know where we are, and we can try to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.